pray. Amen. I want to welcome Brother Larry and his wife. They're visiting us for a short while. Just want to tidy up a few loose ends from yesterday's study. Just read a couple of statements, 3 statements that we're going to read, all saying the same thing. First one is taken from Christ Triumphant, page 55.2, CTR 55.2. CTR 55.2. The next one's 95.5. This is about Noah, his ark building. Noah was commanded to build an ark for the saving of himself and his house. It is stated, Noah, have I found righteous before me in this generation? And it is also stated that Noah walked with God. Noah did not stop to question. We've brought this issue up about what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be in the service of God, and I've suggested that the definition of Christianity is obedience without question. In fact, that's what the gospel is. When you have received and accepted the gospel, you're to obey without question. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on that. We've spoken about it in class already. Whether you speak about morality or prophecy, the requirements are all the same. You have to obey without question.
So why did Noah question?
Sorry, where did he question?
Noah did not stop to question. Or do I understand that?
Sorry?
Or do I understand that in the wrong way?
It's a double negative. Yeah, I think in the wrong way.
Okay.
He didn't stop to question. He did not question. God told him to go somewhere and he started going. He didn't say, let me stop and ask you something. Does that make sense? He doesn't stop, take a break and say, let me think about this. So we discussed this in class before and nobody overly objected, which was good. I think it was Isaiah chapter 1:18. It says, come now, let us reason together, that your sins be as scarlet, etc. I'm saying the only people who can come and reason with God to discuss and say, is this reasonable? Not education. This is not about information gathering. This is about the reasonableness of the request. Because what God asked Noah to do, was it reasonable? Yeah, I'd say it wasn't reasonable. It's not reasonable in the middle of dry land somewhere where there's no water to build a boat when there's never been any rain or anything. It's an unreasonable request. So when it says come let us reason together, it's not about education. It's not a science lesson. It's about questioning what God tells you to do. And if we're Christians, we're not supposed to be scarlet coloured. Yep. Our sins are supposed to have already been washed away. So I'm contending that the only people who can ask questions of God are sinners. People who are out of Christ. And this is the theme, we've spoken about this already as well, this is the theme that Paul develops in the New Testament. We've gone to Romans chapter 3 verse 9, and I think Romans chapter 11, I think it might be verse 20 something. I could check that up in a moment. And he's going to develop the argument of what? What are those, particularly Romans 3:19, because we focus a lot on that. What is his model that he's made? Do we need to read it? We should. I'm hoping we're familiar with that because we've spoken about it enough. What is the point that he's making? There's no difference between who? The Seventh-day Adventist and someone who's in Babylon. They're in exactly the same position when God looks upon them when you enter into a reform line. He sees them the same. And likewise, when you come out of that system and you go into another system, what also is he saying? In Philippians, I think chapter 3, verse 2, what's he saying there? Sister Olivine?
He's saying once you are converted, then you're doing the contracts right. So there are only two classes, one on the wrong, one on the right.
Once you're converted, you're the same. So if I were to ask you, the book of Philippians, who's he writing it to? The book of Galatians, who is he writing it to? It's not Gentiles and it's not Jews, it's a combination of them, because he's just writing to those churches. And those churches have got both classes of people. So he makes this emphasis that there's no difference between Jew and Gentile, either way, whether you're lost or whether you're saved. When you think about it, it's actually an unreasonable model, especially the first part, because the Jews had plenty of opportunity, plenty of evidence, but God, in his mercy, decides just to ignore all of that and treat them as though they had never had an opportunity before. It's in his mercy that he treats God's people in this fashion. Noah walked with God and did not stop to question, what will the inhabitants of the old world think of me if I begin to build this boat upon dry land? He believed just what God had told him, and he commenced to work upon the light and plan that God had given him. So this is what we want to read. He had to employ many carpenters to help him in this great work of building. So that's the only point I want to pick up. But I mentioned yesterday that it might have sounded like I'm just making it up. He had to employ many carpenters to help him in the great work of building. And there's another group of people. There were many of these carpenters, not all of them. There were many of these who were believers at the time. So some people don't believe, but they're going to be employed to do this work. But the largest part of the Noahic world were unbelievers, and they made a great deal of sport of Noah. They ridiculed the idea of building a great boat on dry land. So I just want to pick up that he employed people. Next one, CTR 95.5, it's on the board. Same idea. There are those who will be like the men and women who helped to build the ark. So there are men and women who helped building the ark. They hear the truth. They have every advantage to become people of moral worth, yet they will not choose the good society, but the corrupt. There is an influence that is not heavenly. They will gather to their side and unite with them. And although they act a part in the preparation of the truth that is to fit a people to stand in the day of the Lord, they will perish in the general ruin like Noah's carpenters who helped to build the ark. God help you that you may not be of that class. So this is letter 36, 1887. So without even going in there, if it was a letter to somebody, who's she writing to? What class of people is she writing to if she's writing a letter to someone? Adventist. So she's writing to an Adventist. So let's go back into that. There are those who will be like the men and women who helped to build the ark. So they're Adventists, people like us, Adventists, who are helping to build the ark. I'm saying the ark is this movement. We're not the movement. We're the builders of the movement. We want to make this distinction. There's a difference between the guests and the bride, between the builders and the building. The workers in the building, the priests, Levites and Nethinims, at one level are just the workers or the helpers. They're not the building itself. God has purposely made this distinction to teach us something. Whatever it is he wants to teach us. And it's probably not just one thing. And I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface. I don't claim to have any great deep insight in the reasoning behind that. But I want us to try and explore to a slight degree, which we've already begun to do, why there is this difference. Why do we need to understand that? That we've already discussed this, if you've thought about it. Why make this distinction? Mr. Bromley.
Because probation would be different for each class?
When you say each class, you mean the priests, Levites, and Nethinims? Each class,
I
or
mean the builders,
builders and the building?
guests,
Sorry?
the builders and the guests.
I'm suggesting the builders are the guests. I'm saying, I'm saying you've got the ark, you've got the temple, you've got the bride. Who's associated with the bride? No, the other group. These are the guests, and the temple are the builders, and the ark in this context are the carpenters. Obviously they're the builders. I'm saying there are two groups. Why is there there is this distinction that's being made? Brother Lowe, you had your hand up?
It would seem to me that the ark is what carries us through. And so we're building something larger than ourselves. And that thing that's going to carry us through is what our faith is actually in, the reform line. The line is what sets the standard.
So you want me to put the line here? And the teacher? Or the presenter?
The presenter would be the temple builder.
So that's what you're saying?
Yeah, and the bride would be those that are getting the information from the presenter. But the line itself is not an individual. It's everyone's building on that same line, hopefully.
Brother Nathan, Elder Jeff.
I think you made the point the other day that the bride or the ark or the temple, that they're perfect in themselves, while the other class has, in each scenario, like the guest, there was one guest who didn't have the wedding garment on, the builders that were building unrighteously or for the wrong motives, and carpenters that didn't believe Noah.
That's a statement you're making?
Yeah.
Saying the building's perfect, but the guests aren't.
So have you bought into this idea then?
Do I agree with what I just said right there?
Have you bought into this? It sounded to me like you agreed with this. You said the other day I said this, this, and this. So I'm asking you, have you bought into it? Have you accepted it if bought in is too strong a language for you?
Yeah. I think I do.
Yeah? Elder Jeff? Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to say something outside the scope of what you're saying, but it fits for me, and it's something that Tyler recognized last week, that now the present truth testing message has turned upon organization. And it isn't an accident that as the work of gospel order is being taken up in this movement, that at the same time the discussion of the nature of man is being brought up, and we're looking at how man's nature is organized and how it's organized properly. So you have the large temple and the human temple that are both under an organizational work. So all I'm saying is these two themes about the temple and the builders, or however you want to express it, the bride and the guests, appears to be coming into a prophetic significance now that's larger than we yet realize.
Anyone else? So if I were to do the reform line of the priests, does everybody accept that? Yeah? So we would do 1, 2, 3, something like that. What are we saying midnight is? So we're saying this is the close of probation, and what's happening here? If this is the close of probation, what is this? What is midnight cry then? If this midnight is the close of probation, what's happening in this history? Sorry?
Finding off.
Okay, so but what is happening if you've already closed your probation?
The 7 last plagues.
7 last place. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying just briefly what people's thoughts
The
or ideas
Levites
are.
come in.
Correct?
The Levites.
What's happened to this group? Because this has nothing to do with Levites.
What happens to that group during the midnight cry time period? Or saying Jacob's time?
Yeah. So you just call it Jacob's time of trouble, the 7 plagues. Anyone else?
Would they be the inside? They be the lifting up for that people are looking to?
So would they be lifted up in this history, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah?
Seems to be.
Okay, so if we're happy that this is the close of probation, what we now do is we start overlaying upon this another line. And we're going to take the Millerite line and overlay it onto this one. So this event here, the close of probation, ends up becoming October 22nd. So you've got October 1844. And then what you're going to start doing is start filling in the gaps beforehand. Yeah? So this would be 1798. This would be April 44. So I'm going to put April 44 here. Everybody is okay with that? Yeah? I'm not trying to do anything funny. I'm just making sure that we have clarity on that in a large group like this. It's straightforward. It's nothing new. So we know in the Millerite history there are 2 major events that precede October. And one of them is July 44 and the other one is August 44. We're okay with that? So when you go back to the Millerite history and you ask them what happens at these events, we know that July 44 is what? So what happens there? This is Boston and August is Exeter. So we're familiar that this is the camp meeting in Exeter and this is the evening meeting that he has in Boston. So they begin to understand that this event here is midnight. And then this is, I'm going to call it the cry. So here's midnight and here's the cry of midnight. Instead of calling it midnight cry, I'm just going to call it the cry. But we call this the midnight cry. They don't really call it the midnight cry. They call it the cry. So we've got midnight and the cry. So I think we've all accepted this. This is where people begin to have divergent views of what's going on. I'm suggesting that we're here. We're in between July and August. Does anybody else have a different opinion on that?
I have a question. What are you placing then? What event happened at midnight for us?
Okay, so before we do that, I'm just trying to fish out, before I'm giving you my reasons, where people are, where people's current understanding is.
I was thinking we're on our line in between midnight and the cry, just as you have it, because of 2014. In my mind, I'm marking that as midway.
Okay, so you're here in the same place as I am. Anyone else in a different place? I assume silent means agreement.
I don't know.
Sorry?
I don't know.
Yeah, you already stated that. So without proving it, I'm saying this, in agreement with Brother Richard, is 2014. So there's presentations to discuss the reasons why. But if that's 2014, we're in 2017 and we're headed to the cry. So Sister Terry didn't quite say this in her presentations at the prophecy school, but the issue of the foot washing and the issue of the supper that they're about to have, I think are all connected in this history, and their edginess towards this cry. So my understanding is we're using a phrase nowadays called prediction before midnight, PBM. And I think there's some kind of misunderstanding, at least in my thinking, about what that actually means. So this is when this is where it begins to become problematic. First of all, I want us to see that we've got 2 midnights here. So unless you're careful, it can become confusing. So there are people in our movement who have seen, for the last 2 or 3 years, events that look like midnight. They look like midnight, and they think, oh, we're at midnight. But we're not at midnight. We're past this event, and this cry has all the same characteristics as midnight because it's the midnight cry. We split them up into 2 separate waymarks, but they're the same waymark essentially, because one's the midnight and one's the cry. So people are calling this, I'm saying it's the cry, people are saying that this is PBM. So the first thing that confuses you, if you're not careful, is midnight's already happened, and now we're saying we're predicting it. But we're actually predicting is the close of probation. We're not predicting midnight, we're predicting the close of probation. So I want us to see that. Does that make sense? This is, for most of us, is all obvious, and you might not know why I'm going there. This midnight and midnight cry, this is actually borrowed from a different fractal, if I can say it that way. I was going to say a different line, but then it might confuse you. This is borrowed from a different fractal. This is not the fractal of the priests. Do we agree with that? Do we understand what I've just said? Yeah? This terminology is incorrect terminology for a priest. We should be scrubbing these off. But we're keeping them there so that we have a reference or an anchor point to understand our placement, the priests, in reference to the Levites and then the Nethinims, because we want to keep some kind of framework going, so we have some kind of order. But this terminology is incorrect terminology to this history, because you can see you've got midnight cry and a midnight cry. Does that make sense? So the very terminology, midnight, prediction before midnight, when you think about it, is a bit strange. I'm not trying to change it, I'm just explaining what I think people may be struggling with. And I know they are because I've spoken to people about it. So this technically is the prediction before the close of probation for the priest. Whether or not it has further implications down the road, I don't know. Some people think it does, some people think it doesn't. So this prediction before midnight, that's set here. If you go back to Millerite history, what's the difference between midnight and the cry? Midnight, midnight cry. Sorry? Someone said. Sister Antonisha?
I just said location.
Location.
Still
Sister
for
Shamila?
What would happen if October 22nd, if there's 2 midnights? Are you going to overlap them? Because you're saying, were you saying that midnight cry should not be there at the end and the cry should be there? Or both of those at the end should not be there?
Okay, so by her question you can see that she's got, either I've confused her now, but I'm just writing, I've just put on the board what we're currently teaching. It is not, and I don't think I've said anything out of sync with what everyone else is saying, but there's a confusion, at least in Sister Shamila's mind, and if it's in her mind, I'm sure it's in other people's minds. What I'm saying is that if we did a line that stretched out to here, all of these things lose their visibility. We'd have 9/11, we'd have midnight, and the midnight cry, and Sunday law. And if you stretch it out a little bit more, you'd have 9/11, the midnight cry, and the Sunday law. This is where we've been for many years. Then we developed this, then we, through fractals, understood that we've got 2 first fruits, the priests and the Levites. So what we've done is, we've taken this terminology and just brought it up and put it here. But when you bring these up, these waymarks here, and we've still kept their titles, when you come to the line of just the priests, they're not the correct titles to place here. That's what I'm saying. It's not that this isn't midnight. This is midnight in this framework, but it's not midnight in this framework.
I was referring to the dates.
Yeah.
That says July and that says October.
July, August,
the two
October.
Midnights. The two midnights.
Because
First
this
is July.
Because this is not midnight for the priests.
Okay.
This is the close of probation for the priests. We're just
Right.
borrowing the terminology here
Okay.
to place
Yeah.
it somewhere.
Okay.
Oh, Larry.
Be a 3-1 combination that you're looking at the top line? You'd have the
I
3.
don't know what you mean.
You would back up the 3 that you have at the top line there.
This one?
Would be backed up
Back
to,
it this way?
well, so the priests have their line, and the Levites' line somewhat overlaps it.
Yeah.
And so you're getting essentially, when we did a 3-1 combination in the past, you would have had like the 4th has the 2nd, right, and the 1st and the 3rd with it, the 3 and then the 1.
Okay.
And so what you're getting for the Levites is a repeat of the first 3 that you saw at that point there, just after the close of probation for the priest. So you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand why you're saying it.
Because it seems to me the confusion is that the 3-1 combination isn't being taken into account, that there's this repeat for the Levites.
But I'm not. All I'm addressing is, if you never had any Levites, this line would be correct. If you never had any Levites, you couldn't use
You
that
wouldn't-
terminology.
You wouldn't call that midnight and midnight cry then. You would.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
You don't call it midnight. That's my whole point.
Yeah.
So could you remove the words midnight when I mean
No. Because I want us to. If we do that, we'll lose our bearings. We want to keep our bearings to know that there's something happening here. The reason I don't say that funny. The reason why I'm saying that is, I think we did this in the prophecy school. If this is 27, 27 is
the baptism?
9/11. This is 31. 31 is what? I put the midnight cry. And this is 34. And 34 is the Sunday law. So I know midnight cry is the triumphal entry. I understand that. But it's in 31. Here, according to Matthew 23:38, it says, your house is left unto you desolate. This is the Jewish house. It's left unto them desolate. There's something that happens here outside of the priesthood. That's why we want to try and keep this terminology, so we keep our bearings. It's not just about the priest. There's other things that are happening. What happens in 31 with reference to the priests? If you go to John chapter, don't return there, John chapter 2 from 17 to 20, what has Christ committed to do? To build his temple in 3 days. Yeah? To build, remember the logo that we had yesterday? 46 and the 18 and 18 and 4053. He's going to build it in 3 days. And they say it takes 46 years to build a temple. So you get that 46 and you put a colon between them and it suddenly becomes a Bible verse. 4:6. What book? Sorry?
Hosea?
Hosea. He's saying
Not Hosea. What's Ezekiel 4:6 say?
Vision is every vision is the vision.
Sorry?
The vision.
Maybe I've got the wrong book.
Other date.
Ezekiel 4:6 says what?
Day for a year.
Day for a year, isn't it? You worried me. 1 day is 1 year. So that 46 that they're going to argue with him, he's going to use it back against them and he's going to say 3 days is 3 years. Why does he do that? Why does he explain it that way? Someone wasn't happy with what I said the other day, separate thought. Ellen White says he purposefully spoke it in this way to do what? Sorry? So they couldn't understand. Anything else? What did he know they were going to do with those words? Brother Tyler? They were going to use it against him. He's deliberately setting up a framework so that he's going to give his enemies ammunition to come against him. And he already knows it. He could have said it in a different way. So when the court case comes up, they don't have any evidence against him. So he has to manufacture evidence on their behalf because they're not even clever enough to do it themselves. So he's going to manufacture the evidence. So he says, here's the evidence that you need to prove me to be guilty. So you think about the implications of that as we head towards midnight and we know we're going to end up going to court. You know what's happening and you're feeding your enemies all the information that they need. So by 31, sorry, I've digressed now. By 31, he says it takes 3 days. 1, 2, 3. 28, 29, 30. 3 years. 1, 2, 3. And in 3 years, what's going to happen? They're going to destroy their temple, and he's going to have built another one. He's going to have built a temple. So you get this Laodicean temple and the temple of Ephesus coexisting, parallel kingdoms. And here, the church triumphant has been raised up. So Brother Larry said the ensign is lifted up, the church triumphant is raised, it's fully erected. And now all that happens is people start coming into it. First the Jews, then the Gentiles. So that's why, the reason I said all of that is that's why we want to keep this terminology, so we understand the implications of what's happening there. But that wasn't the point I wanted to make. If we're here and we're at midnight, if you go back into, okay, so this, no, I'm not going to do that. This becomes problematic because what I'm now doing is, without trying to teach it, assuming things, assuming that you know things. There's a break that happens here between this history and this history. I'm saying this is the former reign and this is the latter reign. There's a different experience that happens between these waymarks, and I've discussed, not the other person, other people have discussed the relationship between what's happening here. So Ellen White will tell you, and I think we read it, Sister Shamila read it yesterday, when we said, we had a waymark, didn't we? And we said present and future. And what was in the future? Power. And what was in the present? A work. There was a work in the present, power in the future. She says, don't wait for the power. You're supposed to get everything sorted out in the work. And this framework here is exactly the same framework that we've got here. This is 2014. The problem is, we're having all of this discussion, getting your lives in order where? The wrong side of the waymark. We're at the wrong side. Yep. People are aware of this. I don't mean they're aware of all the technicalities. People, us, we're aware that it's too late to sort things out because we're hard up at the midnight and we've been doing this for 16 years and things are still going wrong. So without an understanding of this issue, that you have to separate the workers from the thing that they're building, you end up having a hopeless model because we've all blown it, except for a select few who are Enochs. I never want to say that there aren't any Enochs because it would be, sorry?
Against counsel.
Yeah, I mean it would be, a judgment that I don't have the ability to say that there aren't any Enochs because it's just at that level it's against counsel. So we know there are Enochs, But we're saying for the most of us, it's hopeless. And the problem with that is that, let's go to Zechariah 4, verse 1. Before we read it, where are we if we're in Zechariah 4:1? Oh, did you?
You're in the closing scenes of the investigative judgment based upon Sister White's commentary on chapter 3.
Anyone else? Sister Terry?
We're at the midnight cry, which for us is prediction.
Okay, so we'll go back to the original history briefly. We've got 3 Persian kings, Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes. That Darius is not the Darius in the book of Daniel. Right. We all know that, just in case people are watching, because that comes up. It's not that Darius, it's not Darius the Mede, it's a Persian Darius who's alive decades later. So we mark Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, the 3 angels' messages, the 3 decrees. So we're here at the second, and I'm saying this would be Darius. And we'd have to put Artaxerxes all the way back down there. So after Darius comes, who's the king that comes after? Xerxes. So I'm going to put Xerxes here at midnight. So we're in the reign of Darius. And what do we know that's going to happen in this reign, during his reign? So he's going to give the second decree. That's why I've lined it up here, the second decree. So this is the temple is going to be completed and finished. So I'll put the temple here. And when I've got temple, I'm saying the temple is finished. The completion of the temple is done in this decree. But it's not done at the very beginning. So the role of Zechariah and Haggai is to complain. Oh, no, what is their ministry? What's their role? Because they've got multiple things that they've got to accomplish. They've got to arouse the people, tell them, work harder. Anything else? What else did they do? Sorry?
Come out of Babylon.
Okay, so they're going to call the people out of Babylon. 2. What else? One more thing that comes to my mind.
Work of purification.
Sorry? Elder J?
Work of purification.
Reverend Larry?
Wake them up.
Wake them up. Okay, so we've gone to Zechariah 4:1. So there's a threefold work that they've got to do. The first one was build. And I'm going to put lazy. They've been lazy all of this time. Why have they been lazy? What's gone wrong? Sorry?
Affluency.
Affluency. But the affluency was the byproduct of them sorting their own house up. But what was the root of all of that? Because, sorry?
Captivity.
They came out of captivity and they were on a mission. They were gung-ho, fully focused on building this thing, and then something happens. The enemies. So who are the enemies? The Samaritans. So this building and this laziness, this affluence, the root of all the problem is not any of that. It's not the laziness, the money, or they get distracted. It's the Samaritans. How do you spell Samaritans? S-A-M-A-R-I-T? I-A-N or? The Samaritans. So I'm saying it's the Samaritans that are the root of the problem. So they've got to build. The other thing they've got to do is there's a call to come out of Babylon. And the other one is? Do you remember what we just said a minute ago? I'm just writing what we just... I'm going to say that's that one, maybe. They stand up and say, you people are what? Sinners. Get your life in order. So that's the threefold work of Haggai and Zechariah.
Would that be the same as saying repent?
Obviously, they're not
Yeah.
getting these people and saying, we hate you, get out. So yes. It's a message of restoration on all three fronts if you get onto the right side of it. So we'll put repent. I don't want to make these sound negative. The purpose of them is to restore. It's to be helpful. So I'm just going to say it in a general way because I don't want to prove it. We're not here when this is happening. We're further on down the line. We're not at 9/11 when Zechariah and Haggai are beginning to build their ministry. But neither are we at the place where the temple has been built. So I'll ask a question. I'm not asking for, I'm not going to try and go for a definitive answer that we all agree on. Where do we think the temple's completed and built? My sister says at midnight. Elder Jeff?
The PBM,
PBM?
whatever that might be.
Anyone else?
PBM.
PBM. Okay, so we're saying it's either one of these two. Sister Terry said it's PBM. She didn't say that was PBM, sorry. She said PBM was something else. So if you go back to Millerite history, what's the difference between midnight and midnight cry? The fanatics are rejected here, or they leave. They leave. I don't want to say they're rejected, I'll get in trouble. They leave here, yeah? So the midnight cry, the triumphal entry, I don't know what it's going to call this, the living testimony. So you have markers there that indicate that it would probably be this way mark here. But I want to say the same thing, but maybe in a different way. Brother Tyler.
They're not all on the same page yet.
Okay, yes, so that's what I wanted to say. Midnight, I want to say it this way. It's one man. It's a lone voice crying in the wilderness. Only one man has got it. What has he got? He's got the prediction before midnight. So he's already got it. But that's not enough. So it's going to take them, 3 weeks or whatever that number is. 25 days. For it to be not one man, but multiple people. So it stretches from not a singular man. And what's he doing? He's giving a cry. He's giving a cry. But this cry here isn't a singular cry. So it's not a one-man cry. It's a what? It's a united cry. Everyone's on the same page. It's loud. The thing that makes it loud is everybody's doing it.
That's why it changes from midnight maybe to loud.
Sorry?
Would that be why the verbiage was changed from midnight cry to loud cry for us?
Perhaps, yes.
I think so.
Brother Tyler, can you just repeat what you said before? What's
The reasoning?
yeah?
They're not all on the same page. Is that
Yeah.
no?
They're not all on the same page. I forgot the phrase that you used. Here, they're all on the same page. Everyone's united. So, I would say that the temple would be built here. And if the temple's built at PBM, here you've got Zechariah and Haggai standing up, and the temple hasn't been built yet. Now, their ministry stretches. It's not just a singular thing that they're doing. It stretches over a period of time. So I don't want to go into where we would place 1, 2, and 3 at which events. But all I want to say is that They're coming in here, and it's this one that we're looking at, or focusing on, number 3, because that's what we're dealing with, the sin problem. And they've come in here between midnight and midnight cry, between 2014 and PBM. They've come somewhere in this history, and they're saying to everybody what? You're all sinners. So we're all sinners here, and the temple is just about ready, because they've already begun to build the temple. If it's finished here, they've already begun to build the temple, haven't they? This is the 6th year of Darius, but when Zechariah and Haggai come up, they come up before the temple's completed, and when they say you need to start rebuilding, what did they do? What did the people do? Obey or disobey? They have to have obeyed, because by the time you get to here, it's already done. Yeah? That's all I'm trying to suggest. That when they say build, stop being lazy, people start listening and they start building. And what makes that happen? What changes from before and after? It's on the board. No, it's on the board here. What changed? For them not to build, they were lazy to build. The Samaritans. It's the Samaritans. The Samaritans are always the problem. They're the troublemakers. They're the ones that are preventing. It's not that they're not there now. It's just that
they don't pay attention to them anymore. Right?
Zachariah says, oh, speak louder, please.
I say they don't pay attention to them anymore.
Because they've begun to lose their strength. In the literal history, Darius just cuts them down with his message. Not literally, obviously. He cuts their objections, so they're silenced. In fact, what they're told to do?
To aid.
To help them. Remember the carpenters? They're all helping. Everyone's helping to build the ark, whether you're good or whether you're bad. So now I'm saying this to all you Samaritans in this room. You're now commanded to help build the ark. So have a think about that. And you have to do it. You have to put your money, your time and your effort to build the ark. And you don't even have a choice about it, because it's on pain of death that you're going to do that. Sister Bromley.
The Samaritans?
Sorry?
Who are the Samaritans historically?
So who are the Samaritans historically? Because we need to go to history to understand who they are today. So I wanted to do a short study on this, but we'll just jump into it. Who are the Samaritans? They come from which part of the land? Just from their names. From Samaria. So who lived in Samaria? The northern tribes. These are the 10 tribes. So the 10 tribes are going to be taken by the Assyrians, 723, 721. They get decimated, and their religion becomes corrupted. By the time you come to Christ's timeline, they're now total enemies, absolute total enemies. And they're worshipping on Mount Gerizim, and they're worshipping on Mount Moriah. And the Jews won't have anything to do with them. So they're... My sister?
Are they nominal Adventists then?
So they're we know that they're relatives, and they've got a corrupt religion. So we know that in the original. So an application there. So you're saying they're nominal?
No, I'm saying, are they? Would they be nominal Adventists?
Yeah. So I'm just writing down your question. Nominal Adventist. What do you mean by a nominal Adventist?
They're in the churches and it's
Okay,
not,
so I'm just going to call it the SDA structure. That's what I understood you to mean? So is the SDA structure stopping us from building?
No.
They're trying.
They're trying? Sister Olivine?
No, I was going to say that the Samaritans, there were only some of the northern tribes left, and the Babylonians had been brought in, or the different Assyrians had been brought in, and there was intermarriage between those people, so they were not pure, like just pure Jews.
Like you?
No. They were...
You just said.
I didn't say like me. I just said
Are
they
you
were
pure?
not pure Jews.
Are you a pure Jew?
What's your definition of a pure Jew?
You've got a choice. You can be a pure Jew or you can be a Samaritan. Which are you?
I'm a pure Jew.
Okay, so you're pure. Carry on.
So they were mingled. So it's a mixture of, you see a mixture there. They were mingled people.
So, Jeff?
Mixed multitude.
Mixed multitude. So, nominal Adventists, they're not causing us a lot of problems. Who's causing us the problems? Who's stifling our growth? Tares.
We've seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
But they will stifle us, the nominal Adventists. They will be the one that goes to the,
After the temple's built.
yeah, they will.
Okay, so I understand your point, but I didn't want to go down that, what we're going to get to here, because maybe they will, maybe they won't. All I want us to just to identify that Sister Olivine said she's not a tear. Is that what you just said? Well, I don't know what everybody else is saying, because we should go around and ask each other, ask each other, whatever, read there. So, coming back to this point here, the temple's fully built here, and Zechariah is saying, you need to get the temple built. So they've begun to build the temple, and the thing that's stopping them is the Samaritans, so they get kind of silence. Temple building can begin. Now, is this temple building that's going on perfect? Of course it is. You've got people who are having all these characteristics which are not good characteristics. They've got a problem. Now, if you've got a theology that says, okay, we need to put sin away, and it's these slow progressive steps, but we all believe in creation, kind of, but it takes time, and someday, somehow it's all going to happen. The problem that you've got is you've got a hopeless condition if you think that you are a temple. Because the temple is, I'm suggesting, about finished. We're almost there. Temple's all about constructed, and you've got people. Just think in the literal. If you're building a temple, the foundations are already laid. You have to start putting blocks in place. So have the blocks been, have they already started being put into place? So if they're starting to be put in place, and now we're going to switch, because now I'm saying we're the stones in the building. We're not the building, we're the stones in the building. Some stone must have been put into place. When that stone was put into place, remember it was cut and quarried. So when it's put in place now, it must fit. There's no work to be done on that stone. So there was no mistakes that when it was pre-cut, pre-formed, it's now just slotted into place. So if someone's already been put in place, the problem is, if we're all doing sin, we're not managing our own personal lives, how do we reconcile these two things together? And I'm saying the reconciliation comes in this issue here. There's a corporate organisation, but you need to organise, I think as some Elder Jeff said, your own personal life. You need to organise the nature of man. So that's why I think it's important to see this thing. I'm certain that the subject of Haggai and Zechariah is going to become more and more important as we begin to understand what they're teaching. So that was just this bit about the sinners. I mentioned a little bit about the Samaritans. So it's no surprise that 2014, the Samaritans begin to leave, because that's when the temple begins to be built. The temple begins to be built here in the time period of the latter rain, and we, the workers, are just out of sync with that. I didn't read 4:1. And the angel that talked with me came again and waked me as a man that waketh out of his sleep. So, without being precise, being vague, in this history here, from midnight to the cry, from 2014 to PBM, God's people are waking up. We're waking up out of sleep, and we wake up out of sleep, we have no idea about what's going on. We don't understand how the sanctuary service operates, do we? No? If you don't understand how the sanctuary service operates, you can't walk through it and thy way, oh Lord, is in the sanctuary. because that's how you're saved, through the sanctuary. If you're waking up and you don't even know the mechanism and the process of salvation, you're in a hard place. So Zechariah is representing God's people at different levels. What are the two levels he's representing them as? If you're waking up out of sleep, you're the second angel. You've got some kind of experience, whether it's good or bad. But now here he's saying, he's making a call, isn't he? He's saying, you lazy people, get your act together. He's saying, I'm not lazy, I'm out of the system. So who is he? Third angel. Combination of the third and the second. Always it's the same way. They have to run concurrently. So just one more thing. I mentioned this at the prophecy school, and there's been a lot of misunderstanding on this issue. So I just want to briefly clarify it. This one here, the call to come out of Babylon. So let me ask you, are you, all of us, where, let me see how I'm going to phrase this. I'm going to take all of this out because I'm done on this. Symbols can have more than one meaning. So if you don't see that, you're going to stumble. So this is the Mediterranean Sea, the Dead Sea, and this is the Jordan River, Jordan Valley. So this is Israel. And over here is Babylon. And Syria would be up here. So, what I want to ask you is, where are you today? Where are you? Which country are you in? You got a choice. Sorry?
Israel.
So you're in Israel. Everybody agree with that? Is that where you would place yourself today, in Israel or in Babylon? Everyone agree with that? Okay. So you're saying we are in Israel. So I want to ask another question. Number 2, Zechariah is saying what? Come out of Babylon. So who's he talking to? Can't be talking to you, can he? Can he? No, you have to follow the rules. Can't say spiritually. If you don't follow the rules, you come to wrong conclusions. We are in Israel. So at this level, who are we? Zechariah. So we are saying to someone to do what? To come out of Babylon. So I'm not sure why people don't see this, but people are saying, I'm teaching. Zechariah said you need to come out of Babylon. And who's in Babylon? God's. I've just put his people. Revelation 18 verse 4. Come out of her, my people. Okay? So if you go back to the little history, how many people are here? This is the remnant. Oh, by the way, for the visitors, because it's already filmed, you don't need to watch all the classes. Remember we did about the remnant, Isaiah 6:13. Remember we did that in class? All the students know it, because we did yesterday, but for the visitors. We picked up the 10th, and this is our... Did we do this in the morning class or an afternoon? We did it in the morning class. So this is my reasoning to say you get 1, 2, 6. If you remember that. It was a bit of a trek. And there was another passage we found yesterday as well. This was in Revelation 11, verse...
The 10th part of the city fell.
Revelation 11:13. By the way, that's a chiasm there, because we've got 11:13 and we've got 13:11. Because what's Revelation 13:11? I saw a beast coming up out of the earth. So this is the remnant. I'm not saying the United States is a remnant, but I'm going to bet you, this is Revelation 12:17. The remnant are going to flee into America. It's the glorious land. So you see a remnant here, and in 11:13 it talks about France, two-horn power, and it says that it is a tenth. And it's a tenth, and you know that's all that's left of all the kings, because it's a remnant here. So, just for the people who are visiting, just make sure, just wanted to tell you that we saw that yesterday. You've got chiasm there, it's remnant, a tenth is a second witness for a tenth being a remnant. So that's all I wanted to pick up. But there's more you could pick up in that story. So you've got a tenth in 6:13 and 11:13. So just coming back here, there's a remnant, and this is the great mass of people. So Brother Larry wants to change that from God's people to the church. So we're saying Adventism is where? Adventism is in Babylon. This is Paul's argument. They're in the world. They're the same thing as the world. They are not Babylon. They are not Babylon. They're just held in captive to Babylon. Okay, so we're going to make that point clear. So if we're Zechariah, and is Zechariah a priest? I mean, literally, I think he is. Yeah? So here we are, Zechariah. We're the priests, and all of us are all good now, because we're all Zechariah. When he said, you sinners repent, who was that? That was me talking to who? Sorry?
Levites?
No.
No.
These are the temple builders he's talking to. It's me talking to you. I'm saying you're all doing sin, you need to stop. Get your house in order. This is not that model. You know, we can talk privately and I can say, you're really bad, you're wicked, God doesn't like you, get your life in order. He does like you. But when it comes outside of this, and I'm talking to another group, I'm saying this people are beautiful, pure and clean. Don't ever say anything bad about anybody in this room. Yes? That's what God does, doesn't he? God can say wicked things or bad things about his people. But when anyone else does that, he says, you have no right to do that. So that's what we're doing here. This we're cancelling out. This we're cancelling out. None of us are lazy. None of us are sinners. We're all hard-working, righteous people. Because now we're talking to who? A group of people that need to come out of Babylon. So if people are thinking, I'm saying that today, if you go to a conference church and you're a priest, you need to stop doing that, form your own fellowship, and separate from the church and leave them in their mire. At the simple level, you're not understanding me. Worse than that, you're not actually understanding your own reform line, which is okay. I'm not trying to accuse that you're all supposed to understand, but I just want to clarify that. It cannot be that I'm telling this movement to say, stop going to a conference church and leave them to die. It's not that, because this movement has already done what? They've already separated. I mean, we were the people that built the foundation. We're the ones who are now busily in construction of the temple. How can we say that this is a call for us to come out of the churches? We've already left. If you haven't left, you need to, I don't know what you need to do. You need to repent or something. It's in a bad place.
Where would the stones that are going to make up that temple be quarried from then?
If you do that, you're going to have to build another model onto that. Okay. And so I'm going to avoid that answer, that question. But all I want to say is that the call here to come out of Babylon is a call that you need to come out of this structure here into this movement here. It's not a call to say we, the priests, need to separate. Why would we not make that call that we need to separate? Because we already separated. We already came out of Babylon under the first decree. We already came out under the first decree. Sister Shamila.
Put the words God's people above Babylon you're not saying that God's people are Babylon, but they're not of Babylon, but they're in Babylon.
Okay.
It's like saying be in the world, but not of the world.
So am I saying the remnant is Israel? You didn't object to that one. I'm saying the remnant live where?
In the glorious land.
They live in Israel. They're not the
Yeah.
same thing.
Okay.
That's what I said. If we
Right,
want
I
to stumble,
see.
we'll stumble.
Yeah.
I put a circle around Babylon, so I've separated them.
Okay.
And it says, come out of Babylon. So I'm trying to be precise on my language and my graphics, that they're not Babylon. It's the SDA church, it's God's people who are in Babylon and they need to come out. So there's a call that's being made to come out of Babylon. Is that call yet? I'll just do this and then I'll let you speak. Are we making the call yet?
Started, I think, in the last camp meeting.
We made the last camp meeting?
Yeah, because there's a work going on amongst the priests, the cleansing of the priests
Cleansing of the priests?
and the sanctuary.
What do you mean the cleansing of the sanctuary?
This temple.
Which temple?
Um,
Which temple? When you say this temple?
sorry, I forgot what you said. Okay.
Just tell me what you meant by this
is
temple.
The builder, but not the building, not the movement.
So there's
The other day
this
I thought you said the temple is the movement.
here.
Does that say builds or builder next to it?
You've got the temple, which is the movement, and you've got people who build it. When you said this sanctuary, or this, I think you said, did you say sanctuary, or temple?
Yeah.
What is the this one that needs cleaning?
The building. I
So
mean,
we've got a corrupt building that needs cleaning.
when I say building, I mean
Movement.
our individual selves.
But us individual selves is
Don't
not the
make-
building. That's this.
Yes.
This does not need cleaning.
What does that say? Builder or building?
Builder who builds a temple. Carpenter who builds an ark. This is, people are stumbling on this issue that you cannot have an organisation with sinners in it.
But don't the people make up the movement? So there's nothing wrong with the movement itself. It's just
Can sinful people who are committing sin be partakers of building this movement?
Yes.
No?
I don't think so.
I've just proven that they can. I gave you CTR 55.2, 95.5. We didn't read the other one.
In Noah's,
You can.
yes.
I see.
yeah.
Did Judas cast out demons?
Yeah.
So good and bad are in the making of this
This
temple.
perfect building, this perfect sanctuary.
Amen.
Daniel 8:14 is not just the cleansing of the sanctuary, it's a restoration. It's restoring it back to its original. This is the rebuilding of the house of David. Amos 9:11, Acts 15, I can't remember what verse. If we can't juggle those two concepts, we're going to make grave mistakes. And the grave mistakes that you're going to make is you're going to lose hope in your own life, which is what Satan always wants to do. You lose hope when you have a misunderstanding of the gospel. Brother Larry.
For the Babylon and God's people, it seems to me that the ancient history of what happened was that God's people were literally in Babylon.
Yep.
And they had to be called out of Babylon with the decrees to come back to rebuild the temple. And that was over the course of, the people weren't obedient right away. They stayed in Babylon. Hence you get Esther and all the story that goes along with that. And so when we say it now, we should be able to see that without calling the church Babylon. We're calling them out of their captivity. So I don't think that should be threatening.
It's the same theme that Paul is developing. Paul develops his theme. The church and Babylon are in the same lost condition. So there's going to be a call. I want to change the word call to what? To cry. There's going to be a cry to the Levites to come out of Babylon. And so I've rubbed it out. That's why I put midnight, and I scrubbed off midnight cry, and I just put the word cry. So that cry is still future. And the reason it's future is because we still haven't straightened some things out. If you want to invite people to your place, you have to have a place for them to live. And at the moment, we don't have a place for them to live. So we're not calling them out yet. So all the interaction that we're having is with priests. When we come to this and look at it spiritually, which we're supposed to do when we make an application, it's not about geography now. It's not about which church you go to or which fellowship you go to or whether you do home church or any. It's not about that. It's a misunderstanding of what's being taught if that's how you're thinking. We have to get out of this literal thinking that if you're part of the structure or you're not part of the structure, it's determined upon where you fellowship or what it means or what it looks like to go into the church and talk to a rebellious nation, or go into the church and start marking people, or however you want to express it. Ezekiel 9, Ezekiel 2. This calling of God's people out of the church is not, what we're doing today is not what Zechariah is doing. Because he's talking to the Levites. So I'll put L here for Levites. These are the Levites that are going to be called out of Adventism. So if you can see this call and you can tie Zechariah with 2014 PBM, I'm suggesting that when all of us come together as a singular voice internally, which will be connected with an external event, PBM, this will be the waymark where we will again go to the Levites and we'll call them. We just shout to them, and what will they do? They'll come of their own volition. Amen. You don't have to bend over backwards and bribe them in and all this kind of stuff. They'll just come in by themselves. And it's different to the dynamics that we find ourselves in. It's a different dynamics.
So if a conference church asks you to come and preach, do you go and preach there?
Yes.
If we're not evangelizing to them,
If they
What do
come
you
to
think?
you,
I mean, I go and preach. So I'm asking because I
Does
don't.
anybody think otherwise? If a conference church told you to go and speak, would you go and speak?
if they come to you, is that different to you going to them?
I don't think you could ring up a church and say, I'd like to preach at your church this Sabbath. I don't think it operates that way. So they'd have to come and ask you. Okay, you go there and they say, oh, you seem clever, do the AY program this afternoon. That's what you mean?
For some time, and they.
Yes, so they're still asking
No, I
you.
mean, if you can you attend and start sharing during, I don't know, like Sabbath school.
Your question, and Brother Larry's question, is the point I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to tell you what to do about geography, which church you're supposed to go to and which you're not supposed to go to, and what you're supposed to do. Everyone needs to make that decision for themselves based upon their own locality. So I'm not trying to tell you whether you go to a conference church or not. I'm saying, when I spoke about Zechariah, and I'm saying there's a call to come out of Babylon, people are misunderstanding that, and I'm speaking to people who are in this movement, and they're coming up and asking, does that mean we need to stop going to a conference church? And I'm saying you're misunderstanding the prophetic symbology, because you've already come out of the conference church. It's not about attendance. It's about your state of being, which doctrines you're going to hold to. Because all of this are the sins of our fathers, aren't they? Yeah? You go from literal to the symbolic. Everyone okay with that? So we had a bit of a diversion because I wanted to clarify for a number of weeks now, well, 2 weeks since the prophecy school, this issue here about the call out of Babylon. So hopefully, at least everybody in this room is on the same page in there's not a misunderstanding of what I'm saying. I'm not saying stop going to church. It's not my business whether you go to church or not. You have to decide that upon your own locality. The reason I'm bringing this up is because people are now saying that there's a message that's coming out, either they're saying that this movement or from me, that is in opposition to an open letter that was published in 2015 around the same kind of time, since about 2 years ago, that we said there's fanaticism in our movement based upon a misapplication of Ezekiel chapter 2 and 3, where people were saying we're not supposed to go to the churches until sometime later on, midnight, which is what their fanaticism was. And so there was a statement that said this is fanaticism, we need to go to the churches today. That's what our call has been since 9/11. And so when I start saying there's a call to come out of Babylon, people are saying, oh, you're standing in contradiction to an established principle. And then I'm saying I'm not. It's because people aren't understanding prophetic symbology. Because a person whoever is going to say that, it's not about that person per se. Whoever wrote, or whoever would write, whoever thinks, is someone who's already on the message. And if you're on the message, you're already shifted countries, you're already living here. You're not in there. So I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page on this issue. It's an important point. Any questions? I thought someone had their hand up. I thought, yeah, someone.
What was a joke I wanted to ask? So the prediction is really more for the Levites. That's the point of the prediction.
So I'll throw that question out. She's saying, if you develop this model that the call, prediction before midnight, isn't even for us anyway, it's all for the Levites. What do we think? Elder Jeff?
I agree with that at the basic level. It's about the Levites, but the call that took place at 9/11 took place in conjunction with a major prophetic event, so I think we should expect some kind of prophetic event at the prediction before midnight. But it's also lifting those people up as an ensign, not just to the Levites, but to the political structure of the world, the Adventist church. All I'm saying is there's a whole lot of things happening there. It's hard to just isolate it down to one statement.
Okay, so let me try and let me think what your question was. You tell me if I'm wrong. So every time you put a waymark, what are you saying? Sorry? It's an event. So we want to make sure that we understand that. So when we mark PBM, it's not just some internal thing that, you know, we get our house in order or something happens or we figure something out. There has to be an event. So I want to make sure we understand that. And if we're thinking about it's the prediction before midnight, prediction before the close of probation, it's going to be a major event. So I think we should all be in agreement on that issue. We're beginning to see what it may or may not be. So that's one point. If I can read into your question, I think you're saying this. The cry that's being made, or the call, is it not so much just for the Levites, because it might be other people as well, but is it for our benefit, or is it for their benefit? Was that what your question was? So let me try and make it a bit more pointed. Is this prediction before midnight, is this some kind of thing that's going to give us an experience to sort ourselves out, so we say, oh look, we've become more holy, we've become better because we've understood the cry? Or is the cry just for outside people who are on the outside? Doesn't help us at all. Obviously there's going to be some benefit, you know, if you help somebody you get helped yourself, but if I can compartmentalize it, is that the cry is made for outside people, the Gentiles, the 11th hour workers, and the Levites. If we can make the SDA structure, the church here, the Levites, because that's who we're crying to, the whole of the structure. And if you get on the wrong side of us, our cry is punishment. If you get on the right side of us, our cry is a lifeline to salvation. Same for the church or the world. So when we think about the SDA church, I'm thinking Levites. If you want to think foolish Levites and genuine Levites, it's about Levites. So there's a double-edged sword or double-edged cry for them, and there's also one for the world. Because when we start putting the three lines on, they begin to overlap. So they're going to begin to overlap at PBM. So the question is that cry for their benefit or for our benefit? Is that the point of the point you're making?
If we're an ensign, then we are, it's Christ as revealed in his people. That's what's lifted up. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. That's for the, if it's a major event and we're lifted up, everybody sees it. But would that not be, there's a plowing that has to be taking place, and that's not for the Levites.
I don't think that was her point. The question that she's asking was not, is it only Levites? Because there's this overlap for all three. Elder Jeff has made that point. I think we all agree on that. There's a call to the world, there's a call to the Levites, whether it's a ploughing or the arrival of the first. The point she's asking is that cry for our benefit? Is it for the benefit of the priests, or is it for the benefit of outside people? So are we saying we'll need to know midnight so we can make some preparation? So that cry is going to say, oh, it's prediction before midnight. Now you need to get yourselves in order, sort yourselves out. Is this for our benefit? Is that cry for to help us to have clarity on midnight or something? Sister Terry.
It's doing its work now. In that it's separating the two classes now, whether you're going to be part of the movement or you want to be an individual. You know, every man and his dog wants to be Josiah Litch or Samuel Snow, or it's doing its work now.
Brother Richard? Yes,
No, that man, no.
Oh, Brother Tyler? Elder J.
Based upon what we were saying before about midnight to the midnight cry in the Millerite history, from midnight to the midnight cry you have this message being given, and the midnight cry just marks the point where everyone is unitedly giving that message, and that's why it has the power and it goes further, because everyone gets it now. They've accepted it or understand it. So by that definition, it would just be the effect of the cause being you figured out the message, I guess.
So, Elder J.
I think those people that give the PBM, it's detrimental to them. It's beneficial for those people that hear it, but it's going to bring on the greatest persecution of 6,000 years of sin to those people that give that cry. So, I mean, maybe that's what they need to ultimately live for eternity. But you need to be prepared for that crisis before it hits.
Sister Kathy, had you?
This is just an observance that I've been seeing lately, and I don't know if it means anything, probably doesn't, but I see that the emphasis that they've put on this PBM, maybe because we are so close to it, is the same emphasis as they've put on like the 2520. Instead of trying to see the entire picture, they've taken a piece of it, and now that's all they're focusing on is this PBM.
Who's they?
Within the movement.
Us.
Us.
The speakers.
And I don't, everybody, I'm wondering if it's something that the Lord in his timing will reveal it to us. I'm kind of confused on it.
So
anyway,
when you
it's
say,
just an observation.
When you say in his own good time he will reveal it to us, what will he reveal to us?
PBM, prediction before midnight, and there's been so many different things thrown out that it might be. So I just don't know. It's just that was just the thought I had. I see they put that same emphasis on the 2520 when that came out, and let go of the Daniel 11:40 to 45, and they just focused on that, and maybe we just need to keep going on the entire picture, and then it will be revealed.
Are we all okay with what I've just drawn here? So I'm going to take that out. I know we've run out of time. I just want to make one point without properly explaining it. If we develop a model that says this, I call this the cry. If we develop a model just with these sticks, these waymarks like I've done, and I'm saying we're here, we're going to end up getting into problems. Because what we're doing is we're here and we're waiting. So if you understood what Sister Kathy was just saying, or maybe if I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, not just her but everybody, she's saying we're here and we're waiting. In God's good time, He's going to reveal to us this. Yeah? But, oh, you didn't say, that's why I'm making sure.
What I was saying is that I'm seeing that people are waiting for that, but that maybe that's not our job.
No, I understand that, but
Okay.
we're waiting for this, information on this, and when God is ready to reveal this information, He will reveal it to us. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, is that a correct model?
No.
Because when does the revelation happen? Let's go to Millerite history. We're at Millerite history, and this is July, and this is August. So I'm cutting, all the preamble. When is the information revealed to the movement? In July here, he reveals it, and everybody says, can't hear anything, don't like that. So it's already revealed here, and the people are waiting around, and he's saying, I've already revealed it to you, what are you waiting for? So he's going to go from Boston to Concord to Exeter, and by the time you get to Exeter, Bates says, everybody take their earplugs off and listen to this man now. Because he's giving you a message that you've been not listening to for a while. So Bates is waiting. Bates is waiting for this great thing. And why was he waiting? So I'm not saying anything bad about Bates, but Bates, who becomes a symbol, has rejected Boston. Now, he may have rejected it in ignorance. He may have rejected it maliciously. I'm not trying to make that moral imprint on him. But it's already there, and he's saying we're still waiting for it. So if we think we're waiting for something, maybe we're not fully comprehending what PBM is about. And if that's correct, I'm saying PBM is here. It's already here. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't need refining, but we already know what it is. It's already here. And all that this is marking, this future one, which people are calling PBM, is the cry of PBM. Now, I don't want to start changing terminology and saying, because if I start doing that, people are going to get confused if I say, no, PBM is in the past. So I'm still trying to keep to the terminology. PBM is here in the future. But you have to conceptualize that the prediction's already been made.
That was 2000.
We already know.
You said
Midnight, yeah. I've run out of time. Is this last point?
I was saying maybe you could put on the craft PBM event.
Ben, I'll put the event. That helps.
How was that the event?
It didn't help. So,
It's not the event.
okay. I think she mean there is an event here. That's what she meant. There's an event that's going to mark that with a cry, which is what I think Elder Jeff said. Every waymark has to be an external event. It has to be an external event. So hopefully that's cleared up some points. Bad people, for the wrong reason, are helping to build this movement. And we should be thankful to them. We should thank them, not condemn them, not persecute them, not say, what are you doing here? Without their help, Noah cannot build the ark. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness, your watch care, and your loving kindness to your people. Lord, help us to have clarity on the time period in which we're living, so that we might understand the work that you have us to do. As we, like Zechariah, wake up out of sleep, we realize that we're in a place, in a situation, in a condition where we should not be. But the fact that we're waking up feeling wretched and sin sick is not an indication that you have not taken care of us and that you have not foreseen these events. Help us, Lord, to understand line upon line the experience that we're now having and have the confidence that you are in control. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.